I'm one of the pastors at Exilic. Our church is 4.5 years old, and we are located right in central Manhattan. Anytime you start a church, the goal of the church shouldn't be to cannibalize other churches, but the goal of the church should be to reach out to seekers and skeptics. And our city obviously has a lot of seekers and skeptics, and so when we started the church 4.5 years ago, they were our primary target. So about a year ago, one of the members of our community said that we're really great about telling people to come to our church, but we're not so great about telling people to go. As a former missionary, it kind of struck a chord within me. So we'll just go past the light and then we'll go down Broadway. You know, your budget says a lot about what you value, and when we took a look at our budget, there wasn't a single penny going to global missions. We were so consumed about reaching skeptics in our own city that we forgot about reaching the world. And so we realized that we had to do something, and it was around that time that Lloyd was challenging churches in our denomination to consider giving 1% of our congregation to the work of overseas missions. We realized that before we could hit the 1%, though, that there needed to be two other numbers in order to achieve the 1%. That's the 10% and the 100%. And so as a church, we wanted to tithe 10% of our community to go on some kind of short-term missions trip. And we wanted 100% of our community to support the short-term trips and the long-term trips through prayer and through finances. Out of a desire to hit those three numbers, we came up with something called the GO campaign, which was a 10-week teaching series where we talked about the 1, the 10, and the 100. And we talked about the least, the last, and the lost. And so the least we interpret as the least of these brothers and sisters is mine. And so those within the Christian community that are sort of marginalized, because we felt like we could not love the world if we don't even love people in our own community. And so we talked about the importance of loving our own community first. Then we talked about the last, which is those that are marginalized in our city and our world. And then we talked about the lost, those that are spiritually blind in our city and in our world as well. And out of the GO campaign was birthed our first short-term missions trip, because we wanted some kind of follow-up, like a tangible follow-up to our GO campaign. Rather than beginning with a missions trip where we just sort of niche focused on one specific ministry, we thought that for our first trip, we could do a vision trip where we sort of had a 10,000-foot view of the lay of the land, the various ministries, the various work that the missionaries are doing in order to do a missions trip later. This past February, we went on our first vision trip to Cambodia. It was a team of 7. Most of them did not know one another prior to going. And so as a pastor, one of the concerns that I had was team dynamics and how the trip would be, but their trip was so positive. That team is now going on to form our first missions committee. And so they'll be responsible for our future trips to wherever. And they're also supporting our first person who is a part of the 1% this summer as she goes off for at least 1 or 2 years. We're a story of a church that really did nothing when it came to overseas missionary work, and a church that is trying to organically and strategically think about the work of overseas missions.